Mail-order bride rejected for her past as a saloon girl, until a lonely rich cowboy gave her a future. The wind cut through the dusty town of Dry Creek like a blade. Church bells rang noon as a wagon creaked to a stop in front of the general store, drawing the eyes of every idle soul in the square. Men leaned off porches, women hushed their children, and old Judge Hamlin squinted from beneath his wide-brimmed hat. From the wagon stepped a woman in a worn blue traveling dress, her boots dusty from the road, her gloved hand gripping a carpetbag. She stood tall despite the sting in her chest, scanning the crowd for a face she had memorized from a daguerreotype tucked deep in her satchel. Amos Cartwright stood at the edge of the boardwalk, arms folded across his chest, jaw locked tight. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 35, with a cattleman's frame and eyes hard as river rock. "Amos Cartwright?" she asked, her voice steady though her stomach twisted. "I am Rose McKenna, your bride." The crowd leaned in like stalks to a sudden gust. Amos looked her over, his mouth a grim slash. "That's so." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a folded letter, yellowed at the creases. "You wrote this. Said you were a man of means but tired of loneliness. Said you wanted a good woman to make a home with." I answered honest. "I told you I had no kin and no fortune, but a willing heart." "You left something out," he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut hide. "You left out that you worked in a saloon." Gasps rolled through the square like distant thunder. Rose's knuckles whitened around the letter. "I told you I worked at McCoy's Tavern in St. Louis," she said. "I served drinks and sang ballads. I never spread your legs?" Amos barked. "That what you mean to say? You think that makes you decent?" A woman in the crowd muttered, "Mercy," and another crossed herself. Rose flushed, the heat of shame burning through her corset. "I never lied to you. I told you I did what I had to. I never claimed to be a preacher's daughter. But I am not what you're accusing me of." "You ain't what I pictured," Amos said. "I thought you'd be wholesome. Clean. A woman fit to raise children and walk into church beside me. Not some whiskey girl with painted lips and a past." Her hands trembled as she held out the letter. "You asked for someone real, Amos. You said you didn't care about what came before, only what came next." "I changed my mind," he said flatly. "I ain't marrying no saloon girl." Rose blinked against the sting in her eyes. Around her the townsfolk murmured. A child asked too loudly, "Mama, what's a saloon girl?" and was promptly hushed. She drew in a breath that ached down to her ribs. "I came all this way for you. I spent every coin I had left to make it here. I left behind a grave and a ghost and every scrap of comfort I knew." "You should have stayed there," he said. "There's no place for your kind here." A brittle silence followed his words, broken only by the creak of the wagon shifting in the dry wind. Rose looked at him, really looked at him, not the man from the picture, not the one who wrote in tender cursive about mornings on the porch and a wife to laugh with, but this man now, rigid, small-hearted, and afraid. She did not cry. She would not. Instead, she unfolded the letter and read aloud, voice clear as bell chime. "If you are willing to take a chance on a stranger, I swear I will meet you with kindness and honor." That is what you wrote. Kindness and honor. He looked away. Rose nodded once, then turned to the crowd. "Seems to me," she said, "the only whore here is the man who sold lies and called it hope." She dropped the letter at his feet. For a moment nobody moved. Then, quietly, a wiry old man near the post office doffed his hat. One by one, eyes looked down, turned away. Not from her, but from Amos. Rose stepped down from the boardwalk, her boots hitting the dirt with purpose. The wind picked up her skirts and the scent of sage. She walked past the livery, past the smithy, past the judgment in every breath of this little town, and did not look back. Her past had followed her. But so would her future, somewhere. Somehow. St. Louis had never been kind to orphans, especially not to girls who learned too young how quickly men could turn need into debt. Rose McKenna had been 15 when her mother died, and 17 when she first sang behind the bar at McCoy's Tavern. The place reeked of tobacco and spilled bourbon, but it paid in cash and let her keep her blouse buttoned so long as she smiled. She did more than smile. She sang Irish ballads, Southern hymns, war widow laments, all things her mother once hummed while boiling potatoes over a flickering fire. The drunks clapped. Some wept. Some threw coins. It kept her and her brother Samuel in a rented room behind a butcher shop for 3 years. Samuel had been sickly since birth, coughs that bled into winter nights, fevers that wrung sweat from his skin like rain from cloth. Rose had sold her mother's locket, then her own shoes, to pay for tinctures and tonics that never worked. One morning, after a long shift pouring rye for a brawling poker table, she came home to find his bed cold. Just gone. No note, no goodbye. Just stillness. Grief hollowed her, but it also sobered her. She no longer belonged to this city, not to its alleys or its men or the mirror that showed a girl with hope scraped thin. One rainy afternoon, as she scrubbed lipstick stains from shot glasses, she noticed a crumpled page left on the bar. It was from a Missouri farmer's bulletin. At the bottom, in uneven print, was an advertisement. Seeking good-hearted woman for marriage. Honest, kind, willing to build a home. I am a cattleman with land but no family. Letters welcome. Amos Cartwright, Dry Creek. She read it twice. Then again. It felt foolish, desperate, unreal, but it also felt like something cracked open just enough for air. That night, by the flicker of a candle, she wrote. She wrote of her love for music, her quiet strength, and the hard choices made by those with no other path. She confessed nothing of her brother's death or the weight she carried. But she told the truth about the saloon, and about her desire to leave it behind. She folded the letter with a prayer her mother might have whispered, and walked 3 miles in the rain to mail it. Weeks passed. She imagined he had tossed it. That he had chosen some fresh-faced girl with a father's blessing and a hope chest full of lace. Then one morning, an envelope arrived. He called her Miss McKenna, thanked her for her honesty, said her letter stirred something gentle in him. He said he wanted a partner, not a porcelain doll. Someone who understood loneliness and still had something left to give. She held that letter like scripture. In the days that followed, she packed what little she had. One spare dress, a comb, her mother's rosary. She pawned her guitar to afford the train fare. When she bought her ticket at the station, the clerk gave her a look reserved for women traveling alone. She stood straighter. She was not running. She was answering. Dry Creek was scrawled on the destination tag tied to her satchel. A place she had never seen, for a man she had never met, carrying only the weight of her past and the last fragile hope of something new. She boarded that train with a heart full of prayers and letters, never once imagining that what waited would not be salvation, but humiliation. Cash and Ridge stood near the telegraph office, a tin of tobacco in one hand and a half-wrapped parcel in the other, when the commotion unfolded on the station platform. He had not intended to stay long in town, just long enough to pick up seed orders and mail a letter to his sister in Oregon. But something about the woman stepping down from the wagon held him still. He saw the stiff way she carried herself, chin high despite the murmurs. Saw the flash of pain across her face when the man, Amos Cartwright, of all people, unleashed his public scorn. Cashin had never thought much of Amos. He ran his cattle lean and his mouth loose. But watching the woman stand there, humiliated yet unbowed, stirred something in Cashin that had not stirred in years. She was alone, in every sense. As the crowd began to scatter, shame clinging to the dirt like spilled milk, Cashin stayed rooted. The woman turned, her boots crunching the gravel, her eyes fixed on nowhere. Her suitcase dangled from her hand like a weight she could no longer carry. The wind toyed with the hem of her dress, but she did not flinch. Cashin stepped forward. "Miss." She froze. "I saw what happened," he said, careful with his tone. "You heading somewhere?" She turned slowly to face him. Her cheeks were pale, but her eyes, Lord, her eyes were fire held in water. "Does it look like I am?" "I reckon not." A silence stretched between them, thick and awkward. "My name's Cashin Ridge," he said, removing his hat. "I've got a ranch about 7 miles west. It ain't much for comfort, but it's clean, and the roof don't leak. You're welcome to stay a few nights. Just until you figure out where next." Her gaze narrowed. "Why?" He tilted his head. "Because I would want someone to offer the same if it were my sister standing here like you are." Rose's grip tightened on her satchel. "You heard what he said. You know what I am." Cashin met her eyes. "I heard a fool talking. And I saw a woman keep her dignity while the whole town tried to strip it from her." She studied him for a long moment. "And you expect nothing?" "Not a thing," he said. "Not thanks, not favors. Just figured no one should be left standing in the dirt with no place to go." She hesitated. Pride and exhaustion wrestled across her face. Finally she nodded, just once. "All right." Cashin nodded back. "We ride slow. My horse ain't fond of strangers, but he's too old to argue." They walked to the hitch post where a tired chestnut gelding waited, eyes half-lidded against the sun. Cashin helped her onto the saddle, then led the reins beside her, boots kicking up dry dust as the town receded behind them. They did not speak much on the ride. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had nothing left to prove, and nothing yet to lose. As they crested the last hill, his ranch came into view, sprawling fields of golden grass, a weathered barn, and a modest farmhouse with smoke curling from the chimney. Rose looked at it and said softly, "It's beautiful." Cashin glanced up at her. "It's quiet. That's what I needed after." He did not finish. She did not ask. When they reached the porch, he helped her down. "There's a guest room. Stove still warm from breakfast. I'll let you get settled." She paused before stepping through the door. "Mr. Callahan," she said, her voice quiet. "I don't know if I can trust you." He nodded. "I'd be worried if you did. Trust don't come fast, but you'll find I keep my word." She disappeared inside, leaving him on the porch, hands in his pockets, heart a little heavier than before. Neither of them knew it yet. But they had just stepped into the same storm. Two hearts, battered, buried, but not broken, drawn by something deeper than pity, quieter than hope. Fate had not saved her. But it had placed her in the path of a man who might. The house was warmer than it looked from the outside, but it was not warmth Rose could feel. Not truly. She slept beneath a patched quilt in a room that smelled faintly of cedar and old tobacco, her satchel tucked beneath the bed like it might try to escape. By day she moved through the house like a ghost, quiet, alert, careful not to touch too much or linger too long. Cashin rose early and worked late, barely speaking unless necessary. But in the silence he tended to small things. The morning after she arrived, a second cup sat beside the coffee pot. That afternoon he climbed onto the roof and hammered down a loose shingle just above her window. At dusk she found an extra log stacked by the hearth. He never said it was for her. He never had to. Still, the distance between them weighed heavy. Rose tried to make herself useful. She mended a torn sleeve in his work shirt, swept the kitchen floor, even chopped a bundle of kindling until her fingers blistered. When she offered to help with the livestock, Cashin's brows furrowed. "You're a guest," he said, setting a pail beside the porch, "not hired help." "I am not helpless," she replied. "Never said you were. Just don't owe me anything." "I owe you my dignity," she said, sharper than she meant to, "and my shelter. That is not a debt I take lightly." He looked at her then, long and slow. "You think I gave you a roof so I could hold it over your head? I think kindness always has a cost." He set down the pail. "Then you ain't seen real kindness yet." The words settled between them like dust on a window pane, clear, cold, unmoving. By the end of the week, the whispers reached them. It began at the feed store. A shopkeeper's wife clucked her tongue when Cashin walked past with a sack of oats. "Didn't know the rancher was entertaining saloon girls now," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. At church, someone had left a folded note on the back pew. "Even wolves dress like sheep when they're after something sweet." Cashin said nothing. He was not a man of arguments, but when they passed through town together one market morning, and a boy spat near Rose's feet, it was the last thread. Cashin turned, grabbed the boy by the collar, and lifted him clean off the ground. "You got something to say to a lady," he growled. "You say it to her face. Or you keep your damn mouth shut." The boy's mother shrieked. The sheriff, sitting 2 steps away on a porch swing, stood slowly. "Let the boy go, Cashin." Cashin's jaw twitched, but he did. Then he turned to the crowd that had begun to gather. "This woman," he said, pointing to Rose without looking at her, "came here with more courage than most of you have ever had to muster. You do not know her story, you do not know her soul, but you sure know how to run your mouths." Silence. Then Cashin tipped his hat, took Rose gently by the elbow, and led her back to the wagon. They rode home in silence, dust trailing behind them like a wake. That night she lit the fire herself. He sat in his usual chair, boots off, reading the same newspaper from 3 days ago. "You did not have to defend me," she said, not looking up. He folded the paper, slow. "You did not deserve to be spat on." She stared into the flames. "Thank you." Cashin said nothing. But something between them had shifted. Not erased, not fixed. Just seen. The first snow fell early that year, soft as breath and quiet as prayer. It blanketed the prairie in silence, blurring the edges of fences and fields, until everything looked gentler than it was. Inside the Callahan home, the fire crackled steady. Rose wrapped herself in a shawl Cashin had left on the banister and stared out the window at the drift forming on the fence rail. She had seen snow before, wet, dirty city snow that turned to slush in alleys, but not like this. Not white as linen, not honest. Cashin came in from the cold with snow melting in his beard. "Fire's holding," he said, hanging his coat by the door. "Tomorrow I'll check the ridge fence. Coyotes'll start prowling soon." Rose nodded, then glanced toward the hearth. "Would you sit a while?" He hesitated. Then, slowly, he did. They sat across from each other, the fire between them. No words passed for a long time. Then Cassian said, voice low, "I was married once." Rose looked up. She was small, strong as oxide. Laughed with her whole face. He rubbed his hands together. "We were married 6 years, tried for children. She carried 2, but neither stayed." He did not look at Rose, only the flames. "The second one, we almost made it. She got sick. Fever came fast. I was in town picking up lumber. Came back to find her in the bed, soaked through. Baby gone. Her gone by morning." Rose's breath caught. "I am sorry." He nodded once. "Me too." She looked down at her lap, then at the fire, then back at him. "I had a brother. Samuel. We were all we had after Mama died. He was sick, always coughing, always cold. I worked nights so we could keep the room warm, feed him. But it was not enough." She swallowed. "One night I came back and he was gone, just gone. Like the Lord had taken him without asking." Cashin finally looked at her, and no one helped. "No one had reason to," she said. "He was just one more poor child in a city full of them." They sat in the quiet that follows grief, not just shared but understood. In the days that followed, something began to ease between them. Rose would hum while peeling potatoes, and Cashin would pause on his way out the door, listening. When she found a patch of winter berries near the edge of the woods, she called to him to help gather them. Their hands brushed in the snow, and neither pulled away. One night she brought out a small banjo she had tucked deep in her satchel. "You play?" he asked. "A little." Under the soft light of an oil lamp, she plucked the strings. The melody was slow, mournful, something between a lullaby and a lament. Cashin sat at the table, arms folded, watching her like a man who had forgotten what music felt like. She looked up halfway through the tune and caught his gaze. He did not smile, but his eyes softened. The next evening he left a jar of honey on the table with no explanation. The snow kept falling. Days blended into nights. Work was harder in the cold, but the warmth inside the house no longer came only from the fire. They shared meals in silences, laughter in small doses, glances that lingered too long. Still, neither said it. Still, neither dared. Then one night, the wind howled louder than usual, and the fire snapped high. Rose stood by the hearth, tending the flames. Cashin came up behind her, his presence a heat of its own. "You should rest," he said. "I cannot sleep," she replied. "Why not?" "Not." She turned, eyes shadowed with questions she was not ready to ask. "I do not know who I am here," she whispered, "or what I am to you." Cashin's voice was hoarse. "You are not just passing through, if that is what you mean." She searched his face. "Then what am I?" His hand rose, almost without his own permission, to touch her cheek. "You are the first quiet I have felt in years." She did not move. He leaned closer. Breath met breath. And then he kissed her. It was not urgent. It was not hungry. It was two souls pressing close in the only way they still knew how. When he pulled back, her eyes shimmered. "If I were someone else," she said, voice thin, "someone with no past, no stories to hide, would you still?" He cupped her jaw gently. "If you were someone else," he said, "you would not be you."
The fire crackled beside them.
Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, something warmer began to grow. Spring had not yet arrived, but the snow had begun to loosen its grip. Mud pooled where drifts once lay, and the sky turned a softer shade of gray. Life at the ranch found a quiet rhythm, morning chores, evening meals, touches that lingered, and eyes that spoke what mouths still feared. Rose had begun to hope. She dared to imagine a future here, one built not from survival, but from choice, from warmth, from love. Then the past found her. It was a Thursday, quiet and windless, when the man rode into Dry Creek. Slim build, sharp mouth, the smell of whiskey clinging to his coat. He sauntered into the general store and ordered rye like he owned the place. It was not long before his voice rose loud enough to be heard across the boardwalk. "You all got a saloon girl up at the Callahan place now?" He laughed, voice slick with mockery. Hell, I'd know Ruby Red anywhere. Girl could pour a drink, sing like a saint, and flirt like the devil himself. The name hit the town like a slap. Ruby Red. Her old name. The one barkeeps used, gamblers whispered, and lonely men had muttered into their glasses. By sundown, the whispers were back. Only now they were louder. Cassian noticed it at the blacksmith's, shoulders turned, greetings muttered or not offered at all. The grocer's boy who used to wave from the fence now averted his eyes. Even the preacher, a man Cassian had lent lumber to during last winter's freeze, looked away without nodding. When Cassian returned home, face tight and jaw locked, Rose knew. She saw it in the set of his shoulders. What did they say? She asked. He hesitated. They're fools. That is not what I asked. He met her eyes. They said your name. The one you left behind. Silence. Is it true? He added softly. Rose nodded. Yes. His face did not change. Does not matter. It matters to them, she said. And it will matter to you. No, it will not. She reached for his hand, but he did not take it. Not out of anger, but distance. The kind that grows when words fail and wounds return. That night, Rose could not sleep. She sat at the small table beneath the oil lamp, a piece of paper trembling in her hand. The words came slowly, and then all at once. I came to you because of a letter. But I leave because of love. You gave me a place I never dreamed I could have, but I will not be the cause of you losing yours. You once told me I was the first quiet you'd felt in years. I will not let my noise drown that. When morning came, Cassian woke to silence. Her boots were gone from beside the door. The shawl she favored no longer hung by the stove. And on the table, folded neatly beneath a smooth stone, lay the letter. He read it once, then again. The chair scraped the floor as he stood, his breath caught not in anger, but in something deeper, something like fear. Outside, the wind picked up. The field stretched out wide and empty, the house behind him too still, too clean. She was gone. And he had never even said the words. Cassian stood in the doorway, the letter still clutched in his hand, the wind howling around him like a warning from God. He read it a third time. I leave because of love. No, that was not how this would end. He moved with purpose, grabbing his coat, boots, and saddle in one motion. Within minutes he had mounted Dusty, his oldest gelding, and spurred him toward town. Snow began to fall again, sharp, fast, blinding. The clerk at the livery had seen her board a northbound wagon just before dawn. Said she was headed to the station, he mumbled, eyes wide at the storm rolling in. Not wise to travel in weather like this. Cassian did not answer. He rode harder than he had in years, the wind slapping his face raw. Snow stung his eyes. The tracks were faint, half swallowed by the rising drifts, but still there. Still real. He followed them like a bloodhound follows scent, driven, unrelenting. The sky turned iron gray. Trees swayed like old men in pain, but he pressed on. By the time he reached the station, the building looked like a carcass, wood warped, windows frost-laced, the roof sagging beneath the weight of snow. He dismounted, heart thudding. Rose, he shouted into the storm. No answer. He pushed open the warped door and stepped inside. There she was. Curled on a bench, arms wrapped tight around her satchel, eyes red from wind or tears, he could not tell. Her head snapped up at the sound of his boots. Cassian? She said, voice trembling. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides. You left, he said. You didn't give me the chance to fight for you. She looked down. I didn't want you to have to. He dropped to one knee, snow melting in his hair, dripping from his coat. If you're the past, he said, then I want to live in it. I want to wake up every morning knowing exactly who you are, because I have never met anyone braver, or stronger, or more worth the loving. Her lips parted, words caught behind disbelief. I don't care what they say, he whispered. I care what you feel. And what I feel is that I love you. A tear rolled down her cheek. I love you, he said again. Not in spite of who you were, but because of who you are. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a simple silver band, his mother's, polished and worn from time. I don't have much to offer but this land, this heart, and whatever years the Lord still got for me. Will you take them? She stared at him. Then slowly she slid from the bench to kneel beside him. You came for me, she whispered. Always would have. She took his hand, and the ring, and nodded. Yes. And there, in the ruin of an empty train station, while snow howled and hearts mended, a vow was made, not to forget the past, but to carry it, together, into something new. The wedding took place 2 days after the storm broke, beneath a wide-open sky brushed with silver clouds. There were no flowers, no choir, no guests beyond the wind and the waiting land. They stood in the meadow behind the house, where the first shoots of spring pushed through thawing earth. Cassian wore his cleanest shirt and an old brown vest. Rose wore the same dress she had arrived in, stitched neat at the seams and softened by time. In her hair, a single sprig of wild sage. The preacher came from 2 towns over, said little, prayed simply, and when he asked the question that mattered, Cassian looked at Rose as though no one else had ever existed. "I do," he said, steady and clear. Rose took his hands, rough and honest. "I do," she echoed, voice trembling only once. They sealed it with a kiss beneath the open sky, a promise made not to impress the world but to defy it. No one in Dry Creek was invited, and yet, by week's end, everyone knew. The town had not forgotten who she was. The whispers still danced through pews and porches. Ruby Red, they called her, behind closed doors. But they also said something else now, something even they could not deny. That Cassian Ridge, the loner rancher who had buried more grief than most men ever face, had finally found peace. That he laughed now, quietly, but often. That the woman at his side walked with grace, and worked like someone building not just a life, but a home. That love, the kind folks only spoke of in stories, had come to stay on the edge of the prairie. She took his name, not as a prize, but as a truth. Rose Callahan. She still sang sometimes, out on the porch at dusk, when the chores were done and the sun dipped low. Her voice had changed, no longer polished for tips, no longer forced. It was hers again, unafraid.
Cassian would listen from the fence line or from the barn door, a cup of coffee cooling in his hand.
They had no riches. No children came. But they had mornings, shared breakfasts, winter fires, letters kept in drawers and hands that reached in sleep. And most of all, they had each other, fully, fiercely, and without apology. In the years that followed, folks kept talking. But over time, even the whispers grew softer. And eventually, the tale of the woman who came to Dry Creek for a letter and stayed for love became something else entirely. It became legend. The kind passed down from porch to pew, from grandmother to granddaughter. The kind that made people believe that maybe, just maybe, love could rise even from dust. And in the closing lines of that story, if one listened closely, they would hear the truth. In a place where folks believed love was fleeting, they lived like it was forever. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of heartbreak, hope, and the kind of love that dares to begin again. If Rose and Cassian's story stirred something in your heart, if you believe love can rise even from a saloon girl's past and a cowboy's silence, then you're in the right place. We bring you timeless romances from the dust and dusk of the American frontier, where bullets missed, but hearts didn't. Subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable love stories set in the lawless lands of the Wild West. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss a moment of passion, sacrifice, and redemption. Until next time, partner, keep believing in love that defies everything.